What began as a strange family dispute in the New Mexico desert would soon unravel into a nightmare involving missing relatives, a burned vehicle, and a trail of lies so tangled that even experienced detectives struggled to keep up. At first, the calls to police sounded almost ordinary. A man named Kane Mays claimed he was trying to reclaim his late father's property after returning home from years abroad. He said family belongings had gone missing, the house was being occupied by relatives, and things had become tense after his father's death. Nothing about it, on its face, suggested murder, but that would not last long. Kane told dispatch that his father had died sometime after Christmas the previous year, and that when he returned to New Mexico, he found the family property in chaos. According to him, his uncle Victor had taken over the home and was living there with Kane's grandmother, Mary Mouser, and his stepbrother, Killian. Kane also claimed that valuable property, including firearms and jewelry, had disappeared. The first call sounded like a legal and emotional mess, the kind of family conflict that often follows a death. But then Kane requested a welfare check on his grandmother, only to cancel it hours later. That alone might not have seemed sinister, but in hindsight, it was one of the first cracks in the story. Then a second voice entered the picture. A family member named Mike came directly to police and painted a very different image of Kane. He told officers that Kane had been acting suspicious, that he was armed, that he knew how to shoot, and that he had been seen at the property dressed for confrontation. Mike also said Kane had texted him claiming that Mary, Victor, and Killian were missing, even though no one had confirmed that. That message made little sense, and it only deepened the suspicion around Kane. What was he really trying to do? Was he looking for help, or was he trying to control the story before anyone else could? When officers checked the property, the scene only made things stranger. The house was cluttered, boxes were stacked everywhere, and there was no one inside. There were no immediate signs of violence, no obvious blood, no shattered glass, no signs that someone had fought for their life. To the police, it looked like the family may have simply moved out. But that appearance would later prove to be dangerously misleading. The mess had likely been staged to conceal what had really happened. And then came the lie that tipped the case into something much darker. Police called Kane to ask about the welfare check and about the text message he had sent Mike. Kane claimed he had only told Mike that he had spoken to the police, but the sergeant already knew that wasn't true. Kane's explanation was vague, defensive, and just a little too careful. He was trying to sound reasonable, but the story no longer fit. Something was wrong, and the officers could feel it. So they went back for another search warrant. Before that second search could even happen, a fire was reported not far from the property. A passerby had spotted flames in the distance and called 911. Deputies rushed to the area and found a vehicle burning, one of the missing Subarus tied to the family. But what they found inside made their stomachs drop. The car contained 3 burned bodies. At first, the remains were too badly damaged to identify, but officers knew immediately that they were dealing with something catastrophic. A disappearance had just turned into a homicide investigation. The autopsy later confirmed the worst fear imaginable. The victims were Victor Pereira, Mary Mouser, and Killian Mays. At least one had been shot in the head. The other remains were too badly burned to show every injury clearly, but investigators believed the victims were likely incapacitated before the fire was set. This was not a sudden outburst of rage. It looked planned, deliberate, cold. That's when detectives started digging into Kane's background, and what they found made the picture even more disturbing. Kane had lived in Canada and had been working as an engineer before returning to the United States. He also had a history of domestic incidents involving his wife, Samantha. When police spoke with her, she revealed that Kane had been physically abusive, controlling, and volatile. She described a relationship that became increasingly dangerous, and she told investigators that she had evidence to prove it. Then she shared a recording from one of their violent arguments. The details were disturbing enough that officers knew Kane's past was not just troubling, it was relevant. Now they had a suspect with a pattern. Back at the property, investigators returned with special chemicals used to reveal cleaned-up blood and hidden evidence. What they found confirmed that the house had not been simply abandoned, it had been scrubbed. Shell casings were recovered. Blood spatter was detected. There were signs that someone had tried hard to erase the scene. And in the middle of the search, officers found something even stranger. condoms and pregnancy tests stored near cleaning supplies by the well house in septic area. It was the kind of detail that made the entire scene feel less like a family home and more like the aftermath of a cover-up no one had expected to survive. The investigation then shifted to Cassandra Douglas, Kane's half-sister. Cassandra insisted she had only recently reconnected with Kane, but investigators found an old Facebook photo of them together, proving they had known each other for years. That wasn't the only contradiction. Surveillance footage from a Walmart showed Kane and Cassandra shopping together with her children, buying cleaning supplies, bleach, vinegar, and kerosene, the exact kind of items that could be used to clean blood and start a fire. That was not the behavior of someone caught off guard by a family emergency. It looked far more like preparation. When police questioned Cassandra, she tried to redirect suspicion toward Mike, painting him as aggressive and hostile. But by then, detectives had already started building a different picture. Kane had been seen driving Victor's missing green Subaru. Witnesses had observed the vehicle parked outside Cassandra's house. The evidence was piling up, and Cassandra's explanations were getting thinner by the minute. Still, she kept insisting she didn't know what was going on. Then the police searched her home. Inside, they found documents belonging to one of the victims, paperwork tied to Kane's father, and live .22 ammunition. In the basement, they discovered bags and items packed in a hurry, with little dust and no sign they had been sitting there long. That suggested someone had been using the space to stash belongings quickly, probably while trying to avoid detection. The evidence painted a picture of urgency, secrecy, and coordination. And once police tracked Cassandra's phone, they learned she was no longer even in New Mexico. She had fled to Mississippi. That discovery turned the case into a multi-state manhunt. When officers reached Cassandra at a motel in Mississippi, she appeared visibly emotional and unsettled, but she still claimed she didn't know what had happened. Detectives began walking her through the timeline, carefully testing her statements. As they did, she kept slipping. She claimed she had only recently met Kane, but police already had proof otherwise. She said she didn't know who had been driving the green Subaru, but investigators had video of Kane behind the wheel. She insisted she was scared and confused, but the more she spoke, the more it became clear she was hiding something. Then detectives tightened the net. They confronted Cassandra with evidence that Kane had filed a police report about squatters at the property and that the family had been using Frank's credit cards and bills after his death. Cassandra tried to explain it away, saying Kane was only trying to reclaim what was his, but then she made a fatal mistake. She spoke as if she already knew the missing relatives were dead, even though police had not told her that yet. That was the moment everything changed. She backpedaled instantly, trying to shift blame back onto Mike and insisting he had been aggressive. But by then, the detective knew she had given herself away. She had revealed knowledge she should not have had. She had exposed that she knew far more than she was admitting. And with that one slip, the investigation finally began to corner her. The case, once wrapped in confusion and family disputes, now looked like something much colder and more calculated. Kane had returned to New Mexico, learned of his father's death, and become entangled in a bitter property conflict. Then, according to investigators, 3 family members ended up dead, their bodies burned in a vehicle, while the house was scrubbed and the evidence moved or hidden. Cassandra's role remained the last major question, but the pattern was unmistakable. This was no ordinary family argument gone wrong. This was a murder case with a cover-up attached. And the most chilling part was how long the lie held. For days, the family appeared to be simply missing. Then the burned car appeared. Then the autopsy results came in. Then the house search turned up blood, shell casings, and signs of cleanup. Then Cassandra fled. Piece by piece, the story became harder to deny. The truth had been buried in plain sight, hidden behind bad explanations, staged disorder, and a desperate attempt to make a killing look like a disappearance. By the end, one question lingered over everything. How many people knew the truth before police finally forced